true crime consumer, I have come across a lot of gruesome stories, but none like this one. It is quite a unique story, not just because of the gruesome nature of the attack, but because the victim survived. This is the story about Alison Botha, a 27-year-old young lady at the time living in Port Elizabeth, South Africa. It is a beautiful Sunday, and Alison and her friends decide to spend the time at the beach. Later on, they come back to her apartment and have pizza, spend time like friends do, and it's a good evening. At the end of the evening, everyone decides to return to their various homes, obviously, and Alison offers to drive one of her friends back home. A very lovely gesture, right? Now, she takes her friend home, she comes back and she tries to park at her usual parking spot. But unfortunately, it is taken by someone else. So she decides to come down the road a bit and park over there. As she decides to get out of her car, a man enters her car from the driver's seat and forces her to push to the passenger side. And he threatens her that if she doesn't move, he will kill her. Alison complies. She just felt like this man was just going to leave her alone. She did not think that this was going to escalate into something else. He introduces himself to Alison as Clinton and says, "Oh, I just need to use your car for an hour." Alison again complies, trying to just, survive. I think she felt like complying would just keep her alive. So she just decided to go with the flow, not fight, just go along with it and just survive at the end of the day. And so, yes, they go on a ride, and at some point, they end up picking another person, another gentleman. Now, Alison says in her documentary that as she saw the eyes of this second person in the mirror, she realized that today is not going to end well, because she said that this person's eyes were filled with something terrifying. Her instinct just kicked in and she felt like nothing good is going to come out of this encounter. They end up driving Alison all the way to a secluded area, and at this point she was frightened and terrified out of her mind. They decide now to sexually assault Alison. And so the first guy, who is claiming to be Clinton, goes and does what he does, and then the other guy he picked up earlier also does what he does. At this point, you would think that these two young men would just leave Alison and go. No, they had other sinister plans. These two individuals have been in police custody for sexual assault cases, rape cases, okay? And they were left, or they were released into society on parole. That is so crazy for me. These two had women coming forth and telling the police that these people did this to me, and so they were under investigation, and I don't know, they were released into the public. Now, they decided that since their other victims had already reported them to the police, they are not going to leave this victim for her to also go and report them to the police. So they decided there and then to finish Alison off. These individuals decided, these monsters decided to attack her in her abdomen area. Alison suffered over 30 stab wounds to her abdomen area. She was completely disemboweled. You know what that means? Like, all her intestines were out in the open. Now, at this point, they felt like she was dead and they were about to leave. But unfortunately for Alison, her leg twitched and they realized she was still alive. They then proceeded to slash her throat over 16 times. And at this point, they felt she was dead, and so they were conversing amongst themselves and they decided to use their real names. And these individuals are called Franz and Thiens. Okay, those are their names. And so Alison heard them after, what they did to her. She could hear their conversation and she registered their names. That's mind blowing, because at that point in the trauma, you're just shocked, you're just in and out of it, you're dying literally. But she remembered their names. And so at this point, they believed that they had finished off Alison and they left her for dead. Alison recalls that she couldn't feel any pain, and that is probably due to shock. But she did not want to die that day. She decided to crawl to a place where she might find help. First things first, she had to gather her intestines, because mind you, the attack on that abdominal area rendered her disemboweled. So she grabbed a shirt and tucked in her intestines. Then she decided to crawl, but she realized that crawling proved very, very, very hectic and was yielding little to no result. Like, she wasn't getting anywhere. So she decides to stand up, because at this point, that's all she can do. She felt like walking would get her to her destination faster. Now, she gets up and all she sees is darkness. So she's wondering, why? Then she decides to touch her face and she is nearly decapitated. She had to pull her head back into position so she can see ahead of herself. And so she holds her head in place with one hand, and then the other hand with the shirt she grabs, she holds her intestines, and she walks with all the strength that is within her. She recounts in the documentary that she had to gather all her strength to just walk. And she walks and walks and walks to the roadside where she finally collapses. Now, thankfully, a car comes by, but unfortunately, the car doesn't stop. And of course, to meet someone like that in the middle of the road, middle of nowhere, and the person is, drenched in blood and all of that might be scary. But anyways, the person leaves, and the second car that comes along stops for Alison. In this car is a young vet doctor who comes out and realizes the extent of Alison's injuries. He decides to comfort Alison, interact with her, try to keep her alive till they get help. Lucky enough, someone has a mobile phone in the car that they came with. And mind you, during that time, cell phones were not common as they are these days. It was really hard to find, cell phones. So for someone to have a cell phone at that time was just timely. Supposedly, the hospital was 15 minutes away, but it took them about an hour and 40 minutes to get there. And in this time, the young vet doctor was just trying to keep her alive, to keep her conscious, just by having small conversations with her. And apparently he shifted her pipe inside because it was out. At the hospital, the surgeon on duty is horrified and shocked at the extent of her trauma. When you watch Alison's documentary, the doctor on duty says that he had never seen anything like this in over 16 years of working in medicine. He consults with another surgeon, and this surgeon is called Dmitry Angelov. Now, Dr. Dmitry Angelov was a general surgeon, and he was told that they would need an ENT surgeon to come in and work on her throat, that area, and kind of secure everything. But he was like, he can do it. So he went to work on Alison, hours and hours of cleaning her intestines. This part of her body was filled with debris, dirt, glasses, all of that. And so he had to meticulously clean, scrub, do a lot of things to make sure that there's no infection whatsoever and that everything is intact. After that, they patched her up, and she was just not, out of the woods yet, but at least she was still alive. And I think that was the unbelievable part of the whole thing, that she was still alive. The doctor said that miraculously enough, the attack on her abdomen didn't hit any major internal organs, and secondly, the slashing of her throat, the cutting of her throat also didn't hit any arteries or vessels that are vital for survival, and so that is how come she was alive. After the attack, Alison wrote the names of her perpetrators in the sand, so Franz and Theans, and she also wrote in the sand, "Love you, mom." Strength to even remember and write those two monsters' name in the sand and add "Love you, mom" is just incomprehensible to me. At this point, police come and see Alison and they kind of talk to her. She cannot talk back because she's just had surgery, but she is able to write down their names and point out their pictures. For some reason, this was not enough for detectives. They needed her to vocally identify her perpetrators, and I found that to be a bit cruel because she has been through so much, and I felt like the names and the pointing of these perpetrators was enough, but it wasn't. So the doctor spoke to Alison because they didn't want to do it, but they had to talk to her about it. And what they had to do was to take out her tube so she could vocally identify them, and she said yes. So they took out the tube and she vocally identified these two individuals. Subsequently, they were arrested. The road to recovery for Alison was not a smooth one. After her surgery, she had to go back to the hospital every single day to have her wounds treated, and it was such a painful experience for her. She recounts in her documentary. She says that it was very painful every day going back, and she had to, recover somehow from this awful experience. Her mom moved in with her and tried to help her rehabilitate, heal, and get past this, heal all the physical and emotional wounds that this trauma came with. And she always thanks her mom for her sacrifice. At some point, she gets better and resumes work. But Alison falls into depression. She just is down all the time. The whole incidents, the media coverage was just so much for her. On top of that, she had to identify these individuals physically. They had to, let her look at them in the face and identify them. So all of these things came together to just really depress her. She was just in bed. She didn't care about anything. She didn't go to work. She didn't care about work. She didn't care about anything. But Alison says at some point in her life, she realized that what she had been through was nothing ordinary. She had been through something very gruesome, very horrific, and she had survived. And she recounts when she was in her body after they had done all they had done to her, and she felt like she had come out of her body, and after she had willed herself into her body. And when she remembered that, she was like, no, if I survived that, then I can survive this depression. She decides to fight this depression by spreading her story, by talking about her story. As seminar, she becomes a motivational speaker. She visits so many countries, over 30 countries, talking about her story. Now, this is a very big deal because at the time, people were not vocal about the things they went through when it comes to sexual assault. So to be out there and talking about what you went through, it was just moving for a lot of people. It really helped a lot of women because yes, they had been through this and sometimes they couldn't even voice out their experiences. And here Alison was talking about it, encouraging women, motivating women, inspiring everyone with her story. It was not just a South African story, it was a global, and it still is a global story. And so that is what she did. She made some purpose out of this horrific incidents, and she found her purpose and she turned it into a business. And although Alison suffers till this day multiple medical conditions affiliated with this attack, she is in a better place now. She was awarded so many awards you can imagine, and even Citizen of the Year in South Africa, she was given that award, and so many others. She has done so many speeches. She has co-authored her own book, which is titled I Have Life. Now, it sounds like a very simple sentence, but it's so profound because at the end of the day, all you need is life. You know, so far as you have life, you can make something out of it. And that has been one of her core messages. She has this message of attitude, believing, and just, you know, making something out of whatever life has thrown at you, and not letting life dictate, or the circumstances of life dictate to you how your life is going to be like. Like, take charge of your life and make something out of this. I am so happy that Alison survived her gruesome attack and survived all the media attention and all of the scrutiny, and went through all of these unnecessary law procedures just to bring justice and to her, and also for speaking out so that other survivors will feel they are not alone, and that their story also matters, and their life is not over because of one incident of violence or brutal attack. She is such a beacon of hope, and I'm so glad that she's still alive today. For her perpetrators, they are still in custody. There was a time where they were nearly sent out of prison or released into the society, but I think that was petitioned and they were brought back into prison. You watch the interviews and you look at the documentary and you read her book, you would see how much of a beautiful soul this woman is. She is definitely the epitome of beauty, strength, and resilience, and her story is one that I have loved for so many years, and I just wanted to share that with you. If you care to know, Alison is very much alive and is doing well, I believe, and I'm just so grateful for her story, her miracle, and yeah, this is it for our survival series, our first survival series. Thank you for tuning in, and let me know in the comment section if you enjoyed the story, if you like more stories about survivors, and what you know about Alison Botha's case. See you in the next one, and do take care. Bye.